you've finally dug into the large and interesting world of Fire Emblem. From all that, you've heard the journey ahead is one filled with difficulty, strife, and a lot of risky decisions. Despite this, you've decided to journey forth to a higher difficulty, or by turning on the dreaded permadeath. Your favorite character can now die at any moment, and the only way to get them back is by restarting. If you want tips and tricks, you've come to the right place. I only ask that you keep an open mind and grab a pen and paper because, with a little help, we can hopefully turn you from mediocre to master. When taking on the old Fire Emblem games, it's important to keep in mind that certain mechanics and strategies from the newer games simply won't work. Things like grinding, buying items in between chapters, and getting defeated units back don't exist in the earlier games. As such, the habits gained from the new games can put players in a lot of danger come the mid and late game. To begin, I'll talk about Jagens. For those that are unaware of the term, it comes from a character named Jagen from the first Fire Emblem game. He was a paladin with high base stats but poor growth rates. His pre-promoted status prevented him from gaining a lot of experience, meaning less experience for the rest of your army if you let him kill everyone. Some analogs in more recent entries are characters like Frederick and Gunter, who both start out really great, but eventually they start to reach diminishing returns. You may have heard all of that and think to yourself, okay, I'll never use Jagens, that way the rest of my army can gain experience. This mentality is negative and unfortunately permeates throughout the Fire Emblem community, but anyone who's challenged themselves in a Fire Emblem game will tell you that Jagens are great for your army. Jagens hit pretty hard early game, and they usually have good enough stats to save anyone who's in trouble. In fact, a useful strategy is having them tank a hit, soften an enemy, then have a weaker unit grab the kill, as killing an enemy gives a unit more experience than simply hurting an enemy. If you play smart and don't invest a lot into a Jagen, the rest of your army will catch up, making a Jagen just another unit. When I was talking about Jagens, I mentioned base stats and growth rates. If you're confused, allow me to explain. A unit's stats before they level up are their base stats, and their growth rates is the chance that when they level up, they'll gain a point in that stat. Some people like to believe that base stats are less important than growth rates or vice versa. This couldn't be further from the truth. Both matter immensely and should be considered before deciding to invest in a unit. Unfortunately, growth rates are invisible and need to be looked up beforehand. The Fire Emblem Wiki has all of them, and they're pretty accurate from what I can tell. Just look up the character's name followed by Fire Emblem and you'll pull their page up with their growths. Just keep in mind that if a character has great growths but terrible base stats, they may require more investment than they're worth. And the opposite holds true for characters with great base stats but terrible growth. While we're talking about stats, let's talk about stat boosting items and how to use them properly. First of all, there's no need to conserve them. It actually matters a lot less late game than one would think, and if used properly, mid game will be a breeze and the units you choose to use them on will benefit greatly. This leads me to the proper usage of stat boosting items. They should not be used on units who have a terrible stat. They will still not double, or still get two-shotted by an incompetent enemy by mid-game, no matter how many items you give them. These items are for units who are just not quite an A unit because their speed is just 1 or 2 points too low to double some enemies. In short, use the items for middling stats, not terrible ones. One mistake I saw with myself when I started out was the idea of unit diversity. I thought that I needed a mage, a cavalier, a thief, my lord, a pegasus or wyvern rider, etc. This is unnecessary if you see a map and the enemy is using lances only. Don't put a sword user in there unless you must. If your enemies have large ranges, put in more riders in there to get across the map and defeat them. If there's a lot of sand in your map, bring mages to walk across and kill enemies. Try to plan out and see what units will generally do well and bring as many as you think you need. Having 2 cavaliers or 3 armor knights isn't a bad idea on maps that require a lot of power over a long distance, or a map with a lot of choking points respectively. Having a diverse group of A-list units is great, but there will be a map or two where even they struggle with the layout. The last thing I want to cover before we move on to creating better and more efficient habits is the subject of resetting. I want everyone to understand this as it is the most misunderstood from casual fans of Fire Emblem. Everyone resets. If you don't reset, that is known as an Iron Man run. Resetting is as much of a part of Fire Emblem as medieval monarchies. Okay? Okay. Let's start with the basics. The preparation screen is your best friend and will help you with anything you need to know before going into a map. How many enemies there are, the number of choke points, the types of units your enemy has, what your character's inventories look like, how units are arranged. All of these things can be found by looking at your prep screen. A properly prepped army can destroy a chapter that initially looks daunting. Next thing that we'll look at is experience management. In Fire Emblem, you may find some of your units lagging a bit in comparison to others. The solution to this is baiting and abusing enemy AI. Generally, Fire Emblem AI attacks anyone who they think they can kill. Failing that, they'll attack the person who can't retaliate. Failing that, they'll attack the character who they can do the most damage to. Use this to your advantage by having a pre-promote or a character who can take a hit, de-equip their weapon, and then have a stronger unit attack, making sure they won't kill, then have your weaker unit kill the enemy. This will give them more experience than if they just chip the enemy. Use this to your advantage to make bad units great, or at least viable. Those last two were pretty easy to swallow, but now I'm going to get into the main aspect of Fire Emblem strategy, number crunching. If you want to be successful in any Fire Emblem game, you'll need to do some calculations based on your stats, so I'll be going through each one and tell you how to apply them. HP, short for hit points. Pretty straightforward unless you've never played a video game before. Strength. This affects your unit's physical capability. Combined with the might of a physical weapon, that will be that unit's total attack value. Magic. This affects your unit's magical capability. Combined with the might of a magical weapon, that will be your unit's total attack value. Skill. This stat affects your unit's ability to hit, ability to crit, and the ability to use certain abilities. Speed. This stat affects your unit's ability to avoid hits and to attack twice or double. Luck. This stat affects a few different stats in a lot of minor ways and increases crit avoidance, your avoidance in general, and your hit rate. The stat can also cause some abilities to be activated. Defense. Your unit's physical resistance. The higher it is, the better your unit can take physical hits. Resistance. Your unit's magical defense. The higher it is, the better your unit can take magical hits. Movement. The number of spaces your unit can move in a single turn. Weapon rank. This is a simple stat that goes from E to A, sometimes S. E being the worst and A being the best. This stat determines what weapons a unit can use, and it improves when using that weapon more often. Might. A weapon stat that combined with strength or magic will be the total attack stat. Hit. A weapon stat that increases or decreases the chance of hitting an enemy. Constitution. A stat that determines how much weight a weapon can have before slowing a unit down. Before getting into how each stat affects one another, I want to talk about attack speed and how it's changed over the years. Attack speed is affected by different things depending on which game you're playing. In Fire Emblem 1 through 4, attack speed is just speed minus weapon weight. In Fire Emblem 5 through 10, a new stat called Constitution deals with weapon weight, causing the new formula for attack speed to be speed minus weapon weight minus Constitution combined. For example, if a character has 7 speed, 5 constitution, and a weapon weight of 6, their attack speed will be 6. In Fire Emblem 9 through 11, replace constitution with the strength stat. In 13 and 14, your attack speed is just your speed, unless specified by the weapon. In order to double, you must have an attack speed that is higher than your opponent. In regard to the exact number, it changes per game. In Fire Emblem 1, 2, and 4, you only need your attack speed to be 1 higher than your opponent. In Fire Emblem 3, you must have an attack speed that is 3 or higher than your opponent. In Fire Emblem 5 through 12, you must have an attack speed of 4 or higher than your opponent, and in Fire Emblem 13 and 14, you must have an attack speed of 5 or higher than your opponent. Keep in mind opponents can double you in the same way. Now that that's all through, let's talk about strength, magic, and might. Your attack stat is determined by a combination of strength and might, or magic and might, depending on the weapon you use. Attack is then subtracted from your enemy's defense to determine how much damage you will do. Next, we'll talk about the hit stat. Your character hit stat is the percent chance you'll hit an enemy. Usually it's over 100 because your hit number is subtracted by an enemy's avoid number to determine the chance your character has in hitting the enemy. Now before you go running off, there's a key part of Fire Emblem some astute audience members may have noticed missing: the weapon triangle. The weapon triangle was created in Fire Emblem 4. This mechanic has also changed over time, initially only affecting a single stat, then multiple stats. Let's just go through it. Swords beat axes beat lances beat swords. This is the rock, paper, scissors element of Fire Emblem. In the game it was introduced in, if you were on either end of the weapon triangle, it would affect your hit rate positively or negatively by 20%, which can affect the tide of battle significantly. It was then nerfed in Fire Emblem 5, only affecting accuracy by 5%, effectively making it almost useless. Fire Emblem 6 then buffed the triangle by increasing or decreasing damage by 1 and affecting accuracy by 10. FE7 and 8 affect damage by 1 and accuracy by 15. However, those numbers are doubled by Reaver weapons when they are used on non-Reaver weapons. Fire Emblem 9 and 10 use the same numbers as Fire Emblem 6. From Fire Emblem 11 onwards, weapon rank affects the weapon triangle, and it looks like this. Apply it to the game of your favor. Before moving on, there's another triangle that, depending on the game you're playing, you need to familiarize yourself with, the Trinity of Magic. It's not used in more recent games, however it affects the accuracy and damage in the same way as the weapon triangle in each respective game. In Fire Emblem 4 and 5, wind beats thunder, beats fire, beats wind, and everything loses to light and dark, which are neutral to each other. In Fire Emblem 6 through 8, elemental or anima magic beats light, beats dark, beats anima. And Fire Emblem 9 and 10 combine both the anima triangle and the light-dark anima triangle. Before I leave you, I wanted to talk about some minute details that might affect your playing experience. There's a mechanic in Fire Emblem 6 through 13 that effectively flubs the chance of your unit hitting by taking the average of 2 random numbers rather than 1. In Fire Emblem Fates, hit chance is a little odd, not quite the levels of flubbery like in the earlier games, but also not as unforgiving as the single random number system. One last thing before I go. If you've never played a Fire Emblem game before, or need some recommendations other than Awakening or Fates, I would personally recommend Fire Emblem 7, or simply Fire Emblem in the States. It's on the Wii U eShop and is pretty easy from the get-go. I would also recommend Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, as that game is also one of the easiest in the series, and also on the Wii U eShop, making it easy to get and easy to get into. If you want some newer entries, I would recommend Fates Conquest if you haven't played that before, or the newest Echoes, as they both provide a decent challenge and will test your tolerance for certain mechanics. That's it. That's the end of the video. If I got anything wrong or you have any questions, leave a comment down below. If you want to know where I got my information from, I got it from the YouTubers Mangs and Mecha. I also got a lot of the statistical information from a post on Reddit by Triforce Ponage, and the Fire Emblem Wiki was also great for some statistical stuff. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.